What happens when one of the most controversial figures in the royal family decides to go head-to-head with one of late-night television's sharpest hosts? Tonight, we're diving into the explosive interview that had everyone talking. The moment when Meghan Markle faced off against Seth Meyers in what started as a routine promotional appearance, but quickly spiraled into television chaos. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really happened here. The Late Night with Seth Meyers studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy. Meghan Markle had arrived to promote her latest charitable initiative, a seemingly straightforward booking that the show's producers expected would generate positive headlines. Seth Meyers, known for his political commentary and quick wit, had prepared his standard questions about philanthropy and public service. "Welcome back to Late Night. I'm Seth Meyers." He began with his characteristic smile. "Tonight we have Meghan Markle here to talk about her new foundation work. Meghan, thanks for being here." "Thank you for having me, Seth," Meghan replied, her media-trained smile perfectly in place. "I'm excited to talk about the important work we're doing." Seth leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting from welcoming to more serious. "Before we get to that, I have to ask about something that's been in the news. There have been some pretty serious allegations about how you've treated staff members, both during your time in the royal family and more recently. How do you respond to those claims?" The studio fell silent. This wasn't the softball interview Meghan's team had negotiated for. Her smile faltered for just a moment before returning, but there was a new edge to it. "Seth, I think we should focus on the positive work I'm doing rather than tabloid gossip," she said, her voice maintaining its practiced warmth, despite the obvious tension. "But these aren't just tabloid stories," Seth pressed on, his journalistic instincts taking over. "Multiple former employees have spoken on the record about creating a hostile work environment. The Buckingham Palace investigation found merit in some of these complaints. Don't you think the public deserves to know your side of the story?" Meghan's posture straightened, and her hands clasped together more tightly. "I find it interesting that you're choosing to focus on unsubstantiated claims rather than the charitable work that could actually help people. Is this really the direction you want to take this interview?" The audience could sense the shift in energy. What had started as friendly banter was becoming something else entirely. Seth, however, wasn't backing down. "I think it's fair to ask about your leadership style when you're here promoting a foundation where you'll be managing staff and volunteers," he said. "These aren't unsubstantiated claims. They're documented complaints that led to policy changes at the palace." "Policy changes," Meghan repeated, her voice taking on a sharper tone. "You mean the same palace that issued statements about investigating these matters while simultaneously briefing against me to the press? The same institution that failed to protect me from racist coverage in the British media?" Seth nodded slowly. "And I think that's a valid point about the media coverage, but that doesn't address the specific allegations about how you treated the people working for you. Can you honestly say you never raised your voice at staff members or made unreasonable demands?" "Every person in a leadership position has moments of stress," Meghan replied, her diplomatic mask slipping slightly. "What I find problematic is this narrative that I'm somehow uniquely difficult when male leaders are praised for being decisive and demanding excellence." "That's a fair point about double standards," Seth acknowledged. "But we're not talking about being decisive. We're talking about specific incidents where staff members said they were reduced to tears, where people quit their jobs because of the working environment you created." The tension in the studio was palpable now. Meghan's smile had completely disappeared, replaced by a look of barely controlled frustration. "Seth, I came here to talk about helping disadvantaged communities, and instead you're ambushing me with palace gossip. This isn't journalism. This is tabloid sensationalism, dressed up as legitimate questioning." "With respect," Seth replied, his own voice becoming firmer, "this is exactly what journalism should be. When public figures ask for our support and attention for their causes, we have a responsibility to ask about their track record. How they treat the people around them matters." Meghan leaned back in her chair, her eyes flashing with anger. "My track record speaks for itself. I've dedicated my life to service, to fighting for women's rights, to challenging systems of oppression. But apparently, none of that matters as much as anonymous complaints from disgruntled employees." "They weren't all anonymous," Seth corrected. "And I'm not dismissing your charitable work. but character matters in leadership. If someone can't treat their own staff with respect, how can we trust them to lead a foundation that's supposed to help others? The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Meghan's response would determine whether this interview could be salvaged or was about to go completely off the rails. Meghan's eyes narrowed as she processed Seth's challenge about character and leadership. The diplomatic facade she had maintained throughout her public life was cracking under the pressure of his relentless questioning. "You want to talk about character, Seth?" she said, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet tone. "Let's talk about the character of a media that builds people up just to tear them down. Let's talk about the character of a system that protects abusers while vilifying victims." Seth didn't flinch. "We can talk about media responsibility, absolutely, but right now, I'm asking about your responsibility. Multiple people have described a pattern of behavior where you would berate staff members, send emails at all hours demanding immediate responses, and create an atmosphere where people were afraid to speak up." "Afraid to speak up?" Meghan's voice rose slightly, her composure finally beginning to crack. These are the same people who had no problem speaking to reporters when they could make money from their stories. Where was their fear then? The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was not the polite celebrity interview they had expected to witness. "So you're saying these former employees are lying?" Seth pressed. "That the palace investigation was based on false information?" "I'm saying that the truth is more complicated than the narrative you're trying to create," Meghan shot back. "Yes, I have high standards. Yes, I expect excellence from the people I work with. But the idea that I was some kind of monster terrorizing innocent staff members is a fabrication designed to discredit me." Seth leaned forward, his voice becoming more intense. "But it's not just one person, Meghan. It's not even just a few people. We're talking about a consistent pattern across multiple organizations, multiple time periods. At what point do we stop calling it a conspiracy and start calling it accountability?" Meghan's hands were trembling slightly now, whether from anger or nerves, it was impossible to tell. "Accountability? You want to talk about accountability? Where's the accountability for the palace officials who leaked private conversations to the press? Where's the accountability for the media outlets that published racist headlines about me? Where's the accountability for the people who stood by and watched while I was being destroyed?" "Those are valid concerns," Seth acknowledged, "but they don't excuse treating your own staff poorly. Two wrongs don't make a right." "Two wrongs?" Meghan's voice was getting louder now, her professional training finally abandoning her. "You're comparing systematic harassment and racism to me asking people to do their jobs properly. You're equating death threats and invasion of privacy with high workplace standards?" The studio audience was completely silent now, riveted by the increasingly heated exchange. Seth's production team could be seen in the background, clearly unsure whether to intervene. "I'm not equating anything," Seth replied firmly. "I'm asking you to take responsibility for your own actions instead of deflecting to other people's behavior. Can you honestly look me in the eye and tell me you never crossed the line with the people working for you?" Meghan stared at him for a long moment, her chest rising and falling with controlled breathing. "I can look you in the eye and tell you that I was fighting for my survival in an institution that was actively working against me. Every decision I made, every email I sent, every standard I set, was in service of trying to do my job well despite constant sabotage." "That's not an answer," Seth said quietly. "That's an excuse." The words hit the studio like a physical blow. Meghan's face flushed with anger, and for a moment, it seemed like she might actually walk off the set. "An excuse?" she repeated, her voice barely controlled. "You think fighting racism is an excuse? You think trying to protect my mental health while being systematically bullied is an excuse?" "I think using those very real struggles to avoid taking responsibility for how you treated other people is an excuse," Seth replied, his voice remaining steady despite the rising tension. "You can be a victim of racism and still be a difficult boss. You can be struggling with mental health and still be accountable for your actions toward others." Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The audience gasped collectively, sensing that the interview was about to take a dramatic turn. "I don't have to tolerate this," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "I came here in good faith to talk about helping people, and instead you've turned this into a character assassination. This is exactly the kind of hostile environment that drove me out of the royal family in the first place. Seth remained seated, his expression serious but not unkind. No one's forcing you to stay, Meghan. But running away from difficult questions isn't going to make them disappear. The people who worked for you deserve to have their experiences acknowledged. Acknowledged? Meghan laughed bitterly. Their experiences are being acknowledged every day, in the press, in social media, in interviews like this one. Meanwhile, my experience of being systematically destroyed by the very institution I was trying to serve is dismissed as complaining. Both things can be true, Seth said calmly. You can have been treated unfairly by the press and the palace, and you can also have treated your staff unfairly. Acknowledging one doesn't negate the other. Meghan's hands clenched into fists at her sides. The careful image management that had defined her public persona was completely gone now, replaced by raw anger and frustration. You know what, Seth? You're right about one thing. I don't have to tolerate this. I don't have to explain myself to you or anyone else. I've spent years being told I'm not good enough, not royal enough, not British enough, and now apparently not humble enough. I'm done. She turned toward the edge of the set, but Seth wasn't finished. Meghan, wait, Seth called out, his voice cutting through the stunned silence of the studio. She paused at the edge of the set, her back still turned to him. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The moment someone challenges you, you shut down the conversation and walk away. Is this how you handled things with your staff too? Meghan spun around, her face flushed with fury. How dare you? How dare you psychoanalyze me on national television? You don't know anything about what I've been through or how I handle difficult situations. I know what I'm seeing right now, Seth replied, standing up from his desk for the first time during the interview. I'm seeing someone who can't handle being questioned about their behavior. Someone who immediately plays the victim card when confronted with uncomfortable truths. The audience was completely captivated, some pulling out their phones to record what was clearly becoming a historic television moment. Security personnel had moved closer to the set, though they remained out of camera range. Victim card? Meghan's voice rose to a near shout. I was subjected to racial harassment, death threats, and institutional gaslighting, and you call that playing the victim card? This is exactly the problem with people like you, Seth. You pretend to be progressive, you pretend to care about social justice, but the moment a woman of color stands up for herself, she's playing victim. Seth's expression hardened. Don't you dare turn this into a race issue to avoid accountability. This has nothing to do with your race and everything to do with your actions. The people who worked for you, some of whom were also people of color, deserve better than to have their experiences dismissed because you faced other challenges. Other challenges? Meghan stepped closer to the desk, her voice becoming dangerously quiet again. Other challenges? I was driven to contemplate suicide, Seth. I was so isolated and under attack that I considered ending my life. But sure, let's focus on whether I sent some demanding emails. The studio fell completely silent. Even Seth seemed momentarily taken aback by the intensity of her revelation, though he quickly regained his composure. And I'm genuinely sorry you went through that, he said, his voice softening slightly. Mental health struggles are serious, and the pressure you faced from the media was clearly overwhelming. But Meghan, you can't use your pain to justify causing pain to others. The fact that you were suffering doesn't give you a free pass to make other people suffer. Make other people suffer? Meghan's laugh was bitter and sharp. You're comparing asking people to meet deadlines and maintain professional standards to what I endured? You're equating workplace expectations with systematic harassment and racism? I'm not equating anything, Seth fired back, his own voice rising now. But you keep deflecting every question about your behavior by talking about what was done to you. That's not taking responsibility, that's avoiding it. Meghan slammed her hand down on Seth's desk, the sound echoing through the studio like a gunshot. Responsibility? You want to talk about responsibility? Where's the responsibility of the people who were supposed to protect me? Where's the responsibility of the media outlets that published lies about me? Where's the responsibility of the family that threw me to the wolves? All of those people should be held accountable too, Seth said, not backing down despite her aggressive posture. But right now, in this moment, I'm asking you to be accountable for your own actions. Can you do that? Or are you going to keep deflecting? Meghan's eyes filled with tears of rage. You know what your problem is, Seth? You think you're some kind of moral authority because you make jokes about politicians on television. You think you can sit there in your comfortable little studio and judge people who are actually fighting real battles in the real world. And you think surviving those battles gives you the right to become a bully yourself? Seth shot back without hesitation. You think your trauma justifies traumatizing others. That's not strength, Meghan. That's just passing on the pain. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. Meghan stared at him in stunned silence for a moment, her chest heaving with emotion. You don't know what you're talking about, she whispered, her voice shaking.
You have no idea what it's like to have your entire life dissected by strangers, to have every decision questioned, every mistake magnified.
You're right, I don't, Seth acknowledged. But I do know what it's like to work with people who make unreasonable demands, who create hostile work environments, who blame everyone else when things go wrong. And that behavior doesn't become acceptable just because the person doing it has been through hard times. Meghan wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with people like you who pretend to care about justice while tearing down the people actually fighting for it. She turned to leave again, but Seth called out one final time. Running away doesn't make you right, Meghan. It just makes you someone who can't face the truth about themselves. Meghan froze, her entire body tensing. For a moment, it seemed like she might turn around and continue the fight. Instead, she looked directly into the main camera. To everyone watching this, remember what you've seen here tonight. Remember how quickly a man will tear down a woman who refuses to be silenced. Remember how the victim becomes the villain the moment she stops apologizing for other people's crimes. With that, she walked off the set, leaving Seth standing alone at his desk. The studio erupted in shocked murmurs and scattered applause, though it was unclear who the audience was supporting. Seth looked directly into the camera, his expression serious but resolute. We'll be right back after this break. As the cameras stopped rolling, the full magnitude of what had just happened began to sink in. Social media was already exploding with clips and commentary. The interview that was supposed to promote Meghan's charitable work had instead become a brutal examination of accountability, victimhood, and the complex dynamics of power and responsibility. Whether viewers saw Meghan as a woman unfairly attacked or as someone finally being held accountable would depend largely on what they brought to the viewing experience. But one thing was certain: this confrontation would be analyzed, debated, and remembered long after the studio lights went dark. What did you think of this explosive confrontation? Was Seth right to press Meghan on these difficult questions, or did he cross the line into harassment? Subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments whether you think Meghan was justified in walking off or if she should have stayed to face the music.